What's going on, YouTube? We back at it again with another recap here of FightLand Season 1, Episode 3. And, this episode, I ain't gonna fake, a lot of things were slowly becoming, unraveled this episode. We got everything going on with Kim, and apparently she's like an undercover cop, if I'm not mistaken. And we know that she's planning on getting revenge, at Marshall's promotion for everything that happened to her sister. And we know that CC, gets the CCT footage of Simeon, going after Duke. And we also know that Zeke is trying to take out the motherfucking Russians. So we got a lot going on, a lot to unpack here in this recap. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. So as we pick up from the last episode, we know that Lazaro was following around the person that was texting on the phone. And we know that on the other side of the phone that it was Kim. But, at this point in time, they did not know who this particular woman was. And they still don't know who this woman is at this time. So we know that Lazaro tried to go inside of the diner, but we know that after he had tried to walk in, that she had ended up walking out. So now we come over here to the fact that she is an undercover fed and she is working to get evidence against Kingsley for her sister named Rena, if I'm not mistaken. And we know that this is not like an official case hearsay. Like, this is almost like a underground type of case, if I say so myself, because we know that Lewis ended up saying, like, if anybody found out about this shit, like, we can fucking lose our jobs. So we know this is sort of not like a on the books type of ordeal. So, and we know that in order to get more information out of the people that she's trying to get information from, she is said that she is going to try to flip Duke and get more information out of him. And we know that that's going to she's going to be doing her thing a little bit later on in the episode when we do come to that. We know that Duke comes up with a plan, with Jay to bomb the fucking casino. And the only thing about that is, they don't have a bomb, but we know that Jay has some type of connections with other people like that. And we know that at first Jay's not really he's not really on board with it, because we know that Duke is a famous, ex-boxer. And it's like, man, you can't just, just walk up asking for a fucking bomb or anything like that. Like, that's just not going to work. Like, you just can't do that. So we know that Jay is going to work his magic, and he's going to end up finding somebody, who can get that bomb and they can plant that inside the casino. So then as we come over here to CC and Zeke, and we know that they still have not heard anything back from Simeon, and we know that CC is a little worried because she's trying to figure out, like, why didn't she bring, why didn't you bring Simeon instead of, bringing Duke around? Because we know that Duke and Zeke had their relationship from the last episode, and they're getting a little closer. And we know that CC does not trust, Duke around the business at all, because we know that he's an ex-con boxer, and we know that he knows about the whole business and the scheme and everything like that. So then as we come over here to CC and Nikolai, so apparently CC and Nikolai are sleeping together, and we know CC, being a woman that she is, she can be using this type of stuff to get more info out of him, but I feel like CC kind of does, have feelings towards Nikolai. So we know in the midst of that whole conversation that CC is telling Nikolai that it's telling him about everything that she had found out about Nadim and his son being taken out, and apparently his tongue being cut out. And we know instantly that Nikolai had denied all of this and being behind the hit of her business, and that she basically saying that he wouldn't do this to her. And he basically puts the blame on, one of his workers, and his name is Sergey, if I'm not mistaken. And he ends up saying that basically, like, he has a tolerance for that type of pain, like he enjoys that type of gore and type of shit like that. And he also said that he was a liability. So now this is just putting the battery inside CC's back, just to, to take, one of the workers out that works for Nikolai. So then as we come over here to Duke, he is approached by one of the old promoters that he was planning on signing after Kingsley on that night before he had ended up going to jail. And we know that the OG still got his contract and is waiting for him to sign it, but we know that Duke does not want to box anymore, basically telling him that, like, it's more things, bigger than boxing right now in my life. And we basically know that he had ended up telling him, like, look, you don't choose when you lead a fight game, you choose how you lead a fight game. And we know that this is probably going to be, more key hints of Duke returning, back in the ring, because we only seen him for that first, scene in the first episode. So I do think Duke will be back in this ring very, very soon. So meanwhile, between that whole conversation right there, we got Zeke and one of the promoters for Legacy Fighting. They're basically trying to, book a whole fight. And we know at first it was a 3-deal fight, which eventually had turned into a 6-deal fight when Zeke had brought up the fact that, he can get Duke Kilroy. That was the only reason that this fight was going to happen, because we know that the Legacy promoter told him, like, look, we're only going to do this. It's only on one deal. If you can get Duke back in the ring because nobody else can, then we got a deal, and we can do that straight then and there. So as we come over here to Kim and one of her friends that she works out with, we know that Kim's friend is basically trying to get in the good graces of Kingsley. And she had ended up bringing up the fact that, that Kingsley basically has a villa where he takes his special girls to. So could this possibly be some type of clue of where, Kim's sister could possibly be at, or was, they just throwing this in, just kind of throw us, overboard and have us thinking one way and it really not be that. So now as we come over here to Duke and Kim, we know Kim is doing her whole magic, basically trying to get on Duke's side. And we know that early in the episode when she had told Lewis this, basically trying to get more information out of him. And we know that she had ended up asking about the whole relationship between, him and Kingsley, basically how Kingsley was there for him, growing up and other things like that. And we know that Duke had ended up seeing the tattoo that was on her back, and it was an R, and it was an R for Rena. And we know that that's her sister who is, basically missing. So in the midst of that whole conversation right there, we know that basically Lewis ends up texting, Kim about everything that's going on right now. And we know at the time right here that Lewis is basically getting, scouted out by Lazaro. Lazaro is walking around, with Simeon's phone trying to figure out who was behind everything like this. And we know that instantly right here that their cover is blown. So then as we come over here to CC, we know that CC is looking at the CCT footage of Simeon in the day that he had left, when he was taken out. And we know that he is looking at Duke, who is leaving the ring right now, because we know that Simeon seen that bullet hole that was inside of Duke that first episode. So now in the midst of all this right here, we know that CC is real thinking and like, man, she already don't like Duke. So this is just adding more fuel to the fire apparently for her to end up questioning Duke, we know, after this whole scene between Kim and Duke. So then as we come over here to CC and Duke, CC is basically asking Duke, his whereabouts. He has seen Simeon, and the last time he seen him, we know this is basically like on the first day, his first day on the job, basically, when he made his return. And we know that still at this time, he's just letting it be known, like, no, like, I haven't seen him or anything like that. And we know that CC is not, she's not believing anything at all, because we know that CC had ended up seeing that CCT footage of, Simeon. So now, as we come over here to Lewis and Kim, after their, cover is blown by Lazaro, basically Lewis wants to take Kim off the whole entire case, because we know that the CI is dead, the CI Simeon, but we still know that Kim is determined to get more information out of Duke, and she feels like, it's more story to be told, and she wants to, end up finding out what happened to her sister, and she's not going to stop until she ends up getting that information. So then this is when Lazaro end up telling Duke about, that it's another person in this whole mix, it's a female and now it's a dude. But at this time, we know that they do not know who the particular female is in question. So now we know that Zeke meets up with Duke and asks him about his time in jail. And Duke tells him that, he was thinking about his brother. But we know he was thinking about his brother too. But he was also thinking of ways to get back at, at the whole Marshall, get back to the whole Marshall promotion. And we know in the midst of that, that Zeke had ended up asking him, like, basically, like, do you like want to come back to the ring? Do you plan on getting back in the ring? And we know that Duke had ended up, basically chuckling a little bit and saying, yeah, but we know that Duke was, we know that Zeke already knew that Duke was lying through his teeth right there when he had that whole conversation with him, though. So, he just ended up inviting him to Aiden's party, who was Joy's son, who could possibly be, Duke's son also. So now that we're at the birthday party of Aiden, we know that a $10 million purchase was brought earlier in the episode by Joy. Now we know that CC has a problem with that, essentially, because we know that she does not like Joy, and she basically told Joy, like, any big purchases need to be ran through me. Like, all big purchases need to be ran through me that's going through the family, because she does not trust Joy at all. And I wonder if CC knows about the shit that happened with Joy and Duke. So then after the midst of all that, we know that Zeke tells CC about the whole 6-fight deal with Legacy Promotions, but CC is not really happy about the decision that that Duke is going to be on both sides of the business. Like I said earlier, she does not like that one bit at all. And she basically says, like, look, you need to go sort this out. And we know that Zeke is probably still going to end up doing that fight, not listening to his sister. So in the midst of that, we know that Duke walked inside of the casino. He was just walking around, and he ended up finding a schedule on the shipment that's supposed to be dropped, and he basically found the area basically where he's going to be planting the bomb at. So then as he gets the bomb from Jay, we know that Duke is basically telling Jay about the whole plan of how they're going to plant the bomb inside the casino, but Jay does not like the idea of killing innocent people. But we know that he ends up telling Duke that he's on his own, and basically he's not fucking with this shit at all, and he don't want to have anything to do with this. And you can definitely tell that Jay was not fucking with this shit at all by the way he was coming off yelling. And we know Jay is a cool dude, but maybe it's more that meets the eye with his character. So then as we come over here to Duke and his father, Gazer basically had a problem with him talking to one of the kids' father, basically thinking that Duke was trying to recruit him work for him, but we know that was not the case at all. And we know, like I said in the first video, they have like a a disdain relationship that's not really there. And we know that the father of Duke basically just kept saying like, look, like, I moved on, and every time I look at you, it just reminds me of the past. And we know the past is being his son Calvin, and also being the brother of Duke. So now as we come over here to the plan at hand right here, we got Duke and Lazaro planning a bomb inside of the casino, and it's a 5-minute timer. Within them 5 minutes, we know that it was a man still inside of the said casino. But we know that Duke listened to what Jay had said and basically said, no, like no innocent lives. Basically, he ended up pulling the man out before the explosion had ended up happening. So now in the midst of all this right here, we got Zeke and Cece so finding out the whole bombing of the whole casino, and discovering the news of Simeon's body getting found. And we know that Zeke immediately puts the blame on Nikolai and the Russians. Like, he immediately puts the blame on them. But we know that the relationship that Cece has with Nikolai, she said like, look, I can't do any of this without proof. I'm just not gonna do it without proof. And she sounded like Ghost from that first season when Ghost was gonna take out Roller. And we know that Zeke basically said fuck that, and he goes to meet up with Duke. But we know in the midst of this, we know that Joy was also there. They was having a good time. Duke and Joy, he was beating it up basically. But we know that Zeke does not know that she's there. So then as Zeke is looking for Duke, we know that they end up taking this whole conversation to the car and basically just laying everything out on the table what it is. Basically, look, they don't know where the fuck their father is. They were just telling people that so they can make it look like, that they know what they was doing. And we know that Zeke is telling everything that had happened. We know with the whole casino, the different hits. And we know that this plan is essentially going to work because we know that Duke wanted to blame the Russians on everything that happened. So his plan kind of worked in his favor, but it's a little bit of a loophole, everything colliding together, because we know back in the last episode, instead of blaming Albanians, they can blame the Russians. And so this is basically when Zeke ended up pulling out a gun and said that he gonna wipe the whole he gonna wipe the whole Russians out. So I'm like, man, shit, bro. And what I do like about how these episodes is how like the end of the episode picks up from the start of the episode, so you don't gotta get like a whole 3 minutes and maybe 10 minutes past. I gotta figure out what happened in the last episode. Everything picks up right then and there. So that's gonna be a wrap on this recap of season 1 episode 3 of FightLand, man. And I know it's a lot of mixed reviews on this whole show, but bro, we're only 3 episodes in, bro. You can't always compare a show to Power. You can't always compare a show to a flagship show that everybody knows, because once you do that and you don't like the certain elements of the show, like a lot of people don't like the whole UK accent. Me personally, I never seen Top Boy and anything like that. I was a little discouraged from watching that show due to the accents, but I just gave the show a try, and I like the show. I got my own genuine opinion about the show. Just like I said in my BMF video, a lot of people don't got their own opinions on shows. They just go based off what the mass say, or they'll look at ratings. And we know the ratings are like a 4 out of 10 right now, but the show just came out. Like, the show literally just came out. You gotta have the show like evolve in the story for it to be like rated some type of way though. So I am enjoying this series. I will be back next week with another episode of this recap episode 4 of FightLand, and we're gonna have to see where things pick off from this episode. So without further ado, I'm Los. If you like anything on my page, any playlists or videos, click them. I'm signing out.